Well, hey, friends, welcome to the Everyday Mulemanship Podcast. I'm Ty Evans, and today I got a very special guest that I am extremely excited for, Dr. Susan Fay from Colorado. So, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, well, I was so excited to talk to you last week and get this lined out. I think I told you a little bit, but a good friend of mine, one of my students of my clinics, her name is Vicky Lawson. She's a big fan of yours.
Oh, good.
Um, anyway, she sent me your book, I guess maybe 2 years ago, and it was just really amazing. You know, a lot of people send me books, and it's fun, and I never, you never know what you're gonna get, right? It's kind of like the Forrest Gump deal.
Exactly.
But anyways, she's been a student of mine for years, and she says, all the stuff that you teach, Ty, you gotta read this book. You have to read this book. And so, anyways, I dove into it, and you can see it. I got it in front of me here. I have sticky notes, and I got it marked up. I got all kinds of things highlighted in here because it was just really fascinating to me. So we're going to talk about the book plenty. I got a few excerpts of it that I'd like to read, and we'll kind of discuss and go from there. But a lot of my a lot of my students, Suzanne, will already know you because I talk about your book
Well,
often.
thank you.
And in fact, your book, Sacred Spaces, it's actually part of our curriculum in the master class that I teach. We teach an online course, and so it's I don't call it required reading, but I say, hey, you really need to read this.
Oh,
If you want to
oh,
get everything out of what I'm teaching, you got to read this. So, anyways, and I know I'm kind of late to the party because when did you publish this book? A few years ago now, right?
I think it came out. I wrote it probably 2018. I believe it came out in 2019 when I finally figured out how to get it on on Amazon, and that was the only thing I could do because I self-published that because I think at that time people weren't so keen to, publish something like that. So
Yeah.
I just went the other route.
Well, it's good. I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you put yourself out there because it is different than mainstream stuff. You know, it really is, you know. Um, but I think if people would just crack that book open and get down to the meat of what you're writing about, they would totally relate to it on so many different ways, you know. Um, you had me hooked at your definition of communion. I love that word. I've before I read your book, I never put the word communion with horsemanship, and for me, mulemanship. You know,
Exactly.
I'd never thought of it like that. But we think of that on a spiritual sense. I'm a religious man. All my listeners know that. I have a belief in a higher being, and so that word did resonate with me in that aspect, but it never made the connection with horsemanship. What made you what made you go to that word?
I've always heard so much in the horse world, and when I would go out and work with people, I'd say, "What is the one thing you would really want with your horse? What's the number one thing?" And they would say, "I want better connection." But when I really interviewed them about it, it wasn't just connection, because connection can be I'm sitting next to you and we're in the same vicinity and we're speaking, but we're not really speaking on a deep level. We're not really hearing each other on a deep level. And I thought, what is it you really want from your horse? And it was that mind, body, soul kind of connection, which then that word doesn't mean anything. It's then communion to me, because that means the whole being, that we're communing with another being in a space and hearing each other and caring about each other and all of those things. So that's why I kind of chose that word, because it set it apart from, well, we're just going to do connection work today. No, it's more than that. And I think people are longing for more than just a superficial connection with another being. I think they want something deeper, whether it's human or animal.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know that mm, thinking of that, just it causes me to reflect on, everybody's uh well, not everybody, but in our business, I guess people's dream of, growing up to be a cowboy or cowgirl, and and it's not I don't think it's necessarily the physical dirt and dust and blood and sweat that they're attracted to of that business. No, no, it's a connection with these animals. It really
Mhm.
is. Uh,
Right.
so that's really cool. I'm gonna dive into the book here and kick this off. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
All right, I'm gonna read a little excerpt here. And for my listeners, you guys, in this show, we are just barely touching on a few pieces of this book. You need to get the book yourself, to really get everything out of this. So I'm just gonna read a few pieces here. The day began when was startled out of a deep slumber by the neighs of hungry horses. It was late November, and a layer of Arctic air had settled over the White River Valley in northwestern Colorado. For more than a week, the temperatures had stayed well below freezing. This day was no exception. After feeding the horses and hurriedly rushing through the ranch chores, I decided it was far too cold to exercise horses. The weather offered me the perfect excuse to grab a good book and curl up in front of the fireplace. Around 4 in the afternoon, I looked up from my book as the realization hit me. I had to venture out into the cold to feed the horses and cows their evening meal. As I pulled on my boots and zipped up my heavy jacket, the thermometer caught my eye. Geez, I thought to myself sarcastically, it's a balmy negative 32 degrees Fahrenheit. We're getting into those seasons again, aren't we?
Oh, yes.
It's coming.
Oh,
It's coming.
joy.
Yeah, it was in the teens here this morning, so it's coming. With my winter gear on, I took a deep breath and opened the door. It took a few moments for my body to adjust to the abrupt temperature change of nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. My only thought was to finish my evening tasks as quickly as possible and return to the warmth of the fireplace. Making my way to the barn, my breath created a dense fog in front of my face. My eyes watered from the sting of the frigid air, and soon a thin layer of delicate ice coated my eyelashes. With each step, the sound of the crystalline snow squeaking beneath my boots interrupted the quiet stillness of the air. Unfortunately, the heavy boots and gloves I was wearing were providing defenseless against the intrusive cold. My fingers and toes felt like they were on fire inside, a painful, surreal sensation that happens when the blood flows to your extremities slow so that there is more available to keep your vital organs warm. Approaching the barn, the first thing I spotted was the faint silhouette of my horses. A thin white cloud camouflaged their features. Mist rose from their nostrils as they exhaled like puffs of smoke from fire-breathing dragons. Once at the barn, I tossed each horse extra hay and filled up their heated water tanks. Usually, I took my time doing the evening chores. The sound of horses munching hay and blowing softly through their noses in rhythmic sighs was like a comforting lullaby. But with darkness looming, I didn't linger. Soon the sun would retreat behind the mountain, and any small bit of heat it had created during the day would dissipate into the clear night sky. After a body numbing hour in the cold, I was relieved to be done. But as soon as I stepped inside the welcome warmth of my house, the phone rang. Hi, Susie. It's Laura. She was having trouble getting the words out. Her tone immediately put me on alert. I asked, "Is something wrong?" "Yes," she stuttered. "Hurry. One of your horses is trapped on in the cattle guard at the end of your road." Alarmed, I mumbled, "I'll be right out." My heart was pounding and I felt faint. As I zipped up my coat, I pondered the fact that Laura and I didn't have the manpower, equipment, or strength to free the horse. The graphic stories of horses breaking their legs trying to escape from cattle guard echoed in my mind. As I ran toward the barn, my mind raced. Had I missed feeding one of my horses? No. Had I left a gate or stall door open? No. Why did one of my horses leave their hay, the other horses in the comfort of the barn? It made no sense. In a daze, I grabbed the closest halter and lead rope. I knew these two items would be useless in a rescue attempt. Their only real purpose was to calm my nerves. Dread soon replaced my initial panic as I made my way down the road. Laura and I were on our own. Any additional help was hours away. Cell phones didn't work in the valley. They were like the halter and lead rope I desperately clung to, useless. When I neared the cattle guard, the blurred outline of a horse emerged out of the haze. Once my eyes adjusted to the approaching darkness, I recognized the muscular sorrel yielding. He belonged to my neighbor, Ben. To my surprise, the horse was standing quietly, seemingly unaware of his predicament. Laura was stroking his neck, trying to comfort them both. We stood in silence for a moment, overcome by the hopelessness of the situation. I heard Laura mutter, "I will go get the owner. I'll make sure he brings his gun." While I stood there waiting for Laura and Ben, I a startling thought came into my mind. It might be possible to talk to the horse. For Pete's sake, I mumbled to myself, the cold must have affected my mind. I'm no Dr. Doolittle. I like that comment. Oh well, no one will ever know. No harm in trying. I've heard that animals could read the pictures in our minds, but I was skeptical. An internal debate seemed pointless given the circumstances, so I started making pictures in my mind. In my imagination, I saw the horse navigating his way out of the cattle guard calmly. If the horse could interpret my mind pictures, there was a small chance he could get out on his own. He had solid footing beneath him. The below zero temperatures and recent heavy snowfalls had formed a hard packed base under the grate. As I continued to send positive thoughts and images to the gelding, a strange sense of calm and warmth suddenly washed over me. I closed my eyes and encouraged the gelding in my mind to try. Then I gave the leader rope a gentle pull. To my astonishment, he moved forward a few feet, just as I pictured. Then, in one powerful movement, he lifted his front feet from the grate and launched himself out of the cattle guard. That one gigantic leap landed him on solid ground. He was out, uninjured. Laura and Ben appeared a few moments later. There was astonished silence. The humans spoke no words. At first, I wasn't sure if the quivering in my body was a result of the cold, excess adrenaline, or something more profound. I watched Ben lead his horse down the road and they slowly disappeared into the mist. At the same time, I felt the fog of doubt begin to lift from my mind. I turned toward my house, surprised at the clarity that seemed to increase with every step. I would never see my interactions with horses quite the same again. Wow, what an experience.
You you just took me back to that. I mean, I'm almost in tears right now, just kind of reliving that whole experience. It was so incredibly profound for me. Um, I spent so much time by myself out there on the ranch and talking about things like that were taboo really within the ranching community, as you can imagine. I mean, people would, yeah, she's just a crazy one out there. And it really propelled me onto a different path at that experience. Although I'd been, playing with talking to my horses, and I did it in a casual way that, oh yeah, well, I'm just talking to my horses because I have no one else to talk to. But that really solidified a lot in my mind, and it sent me on to understanding why did that happen? How did that happen in a really scientific way, not just, oh, some fluke thing or whatever, but it's there's those times in your life when I think God, whatever says, now it's time. Here, let me show you something else.
Oh
And they
yeah.
open the doors open and you go, oh my gosh, that's a reason that happened. And I'm supposed to share that with other people. But how do I do that?
Man, what
So
a, I've never had a moment like that, that was that intense and maybe that risky or yeah, I mean really that dangerous. I've played with it with cows a lot. When you called me the other day, I was going out to gather some cows, and the wind was just blowing. I told you it was cold. It was cold. The wind was just howling, but I played with it with cattle a lot because it's very easy to get to ramming and jamming cows.
mhm,
People just they watch too many westerns. They do,
they
and
do.
it's like that's not no, don't do that. You're gonna get fired if you work them like that, for one.
Exactly.
But just think about it. Where do you want those cows to go? How do you want them to go there? Think about it.
Hmm.
And something that I try to get my students to do in my clinics, because a lot of people are very vocal. they'll talk about what they want to do. They'll verbalize what they're trying to get their horse or their mule to do. And I'm not saying that's bad because in fact, a lot of times if you do verbalize it, it does cause you to at least think about it a
Right.
little bit. You have to think about it a
Exactly.
little bit if you verbalize. So, all right, that's okay. But if they're really vocal, I'll say everything that you're saying, just think about that instead of actually laying it out your mouth and see what that does. And I think it causes you to, yeah, you really got to picture it. And this picturing, this sentence. So I started making pictures in my mind. That is just so amazing. What can you recall the pictures that you were making? Can you describe them? Picking up a foot?
Yeah, it was interesting how he was stuck in the cattle guard. It wasn't, it was more like horizontal to it. So his legs were in between the bars, like straddling the bars, rather than how they would usually walk through and then there's a bar there and there's not much room. So I visualized him if he could leap out. I kind of made the picture of like if you launched your body out and over, you would hit on the ground, the solid ground off to the side of the cattle guard. And I kept just running like a movie in my mind of his body coming up and then him just taking a big leap out. And I just kept it on like a loop running through my mind. Um, the same thing. And just as I was doing it, and now I think it was just there wasn't an element of fear in my body as I was doing that imagery. It was a very calm. When I was saying that calmness came over, I think that happens sometimes in really stressful situations where the panic is no longer an option. And it's like it's a life or death thing. And here's this feeling of like it just comes over you. And I just kept that feeling of the calmness and the picture running. So I think it might have been the combination of both. Now that I know more and I'm thinking back and reflecting on that moment, that it was coupled with that feeling of calmness instead of panic. Because a lot of times we marry a picture with something like an intensity to it, like this has to happen and you have to do this, or there's all of this angst behind it. And this one, it was such a calmness behind the picture. And I think that's what made it get through to that horse. Because if you think about when you get in that stress place, your brain pretty much shuts off and you're in fight or flight. This one was not at all that place. It was a really like thoughtful place. And you only get there through the calmness, right? So, if I were to go back and rewrite that story, it would have been adding that element to it. If behind that picture was the calm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you're having me in this. It's really, really interesting in this interview, which I'm really appreciative. It's like you're making me think about that moment in a deeper, more complex way, based on where I'm at now and,
Yeah.
what I'm teaching.
Yeah. Like I said, when my friend sent me this book, I'm like, oh my gosh, you wrote down everything I've been trying to tell people. This is what I've been trying to say. So this reminds me when I was in college, I was on the Utah Valley. It was a state college back then. Now it's a university, but Utah Valley State College rodeo team, and I rode saddle bronc horses. And my coach Louis Field, he's a very respected, in the rodeo world, very accomplished. He's a legend. He really is. But he would have us do these exercises. And at the time, honestly, at the time, we all kind of mumbled and grumbled about him because he would have us visualize and picture in our mind every jump that is going to happen with that bucking horse. So he'd have us picture everything from our preparation before we got on the horse, as we're saddling up the horse, and putting the halter on and measuring our bronc rein and sitting down, taking your stirrups, leaning back, nodding your head, the chute gate opening, every jump. And he would have us picture how we're operating. And he'd be very particular that we go slow because
Mhm.
he said, and this is why it reminded me because you talked about intention, or the energy, the coming in there with different. with that different energy, I guess, or speed or whatever word you like to put with it, right? He would have us go really slow because he'd say, if you go too fast in your visualization, you're gonna buck yourself off.
Yes, wise man.
And I mean, he was serious and it was real because it's crazy how the brain will work. Because yeah, I remember I'd be making a great ride in my mind. I was doing so good, and all of a sudden I'd buck myself off. What are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So I really like how you describe that calmness and really just slowing things down, you know.
Right, right. And you probably see it too. It's like people think too fast, they do too fast. And, people often say to me, well, I can't go as slow as you. And it's like, no, my mind is maybe going slower, but my body can still go fast. I can still do a lot of stuff, but my mind and my internal place of stillness is still very quiet and slow. But I could be running, across the field really fast or riding a horse at a gallop, but my mind's still going slow.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, since I was just speaking about my rodeo days, it reminded me of another thing. Um, I realized that it took a lot of time to get to the point where you actually could slow down your mind in those intense moments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a bronc ride, you got 8 seconds of bucking, a couple more seconds to jump off on the pickup man if you make it, and
Yeah.
um, but those 8 seconds, once I hit a certain tipping point in my knowledge of it and in my ability of it, it got to the point where I could really slow things down. And
Mhm.
every jump was just slow. And it was the same thing in my mulemanship and my horsemanship too. It used to be such a blur of, you know, you're loping down the arena and you want to get a hard stop or whatever, and shoot, used to just be a blur. You just run down there and ram and jam, and well, maybe it worked,
Right.
maybe it didn't. Who knows? But now, I can slow it down. I can think about the feet. Which foot is coming off the ground? When do I ask that foot to stop? Is the mule or the horse prepared for the stop? And then I can picture it while I'm like you're talking about, while you're going fast. What I
Mm-hmm.
want to have happen, what needs to to happen there. So
Yeah. And
amazing.
it does take practice, like you say. It's a mental. I went in after I got my PhD. I went and did almost a year worth of mental training, uh, and I thought I was going to coach athletes and things like that, but I I realized that was not what I really wanted to do. But in that exploration of all the mental things that we do, it was so helpful. And it's a practice. It's like weightlifting or any other sport that you engage in. When you train your brain, it takes a lot of practice and repetition and attention to it before you get good, before you can slow it down, like what you're talking about.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Everybody listening, you guys, you got to get the book because she is giving you a outline here. She's giving you a plan of how to do this, how to do what we're talking about. You tell them. I mean, it's right here. Just read the book. But these things still, you guys, people can't buy this ability. They can't even be taught the ability. You have to go do this. You have to practice this. And I'm not saying I got it at all. I don't. Not even close what I want, but we're working at it. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because this is interesting. Um, this is very interesting to me. Animal magnetism. I'm going to read a little bit. Animal magnetism is a term used to describe the trait of someone who attracts admiring fans using some type of invisible force. What a person with animal magnetism actually has is the ability to create a positive electromagnetic energy field around themselves. Their energy field is so strong that it affects everyone in their immediate proximity. They draw people to them because their energy makes others feel good. Now, I had searched. I never had heard this term until I read this book, and I was like, oh, there it is. Because you're trying to describe that feel. You know, this reminded me. like I was doing a cult starting clinic, and the person was coming in there with with an energy that was unattractive to their mule. I mean, it was clear, the animal's like, no, no, I don't want nothing, you know. And I'm trying to describe to them, well, how, what do you feel inside? What are you like? What's going on within you? And then finally they admitted, like, I just want to catch the son of a gun.
Yeah,
Well, we're gonna be here a while, boy.
yeah, a long while.
And I can't remember the exact quote, but something along the lines of, the horse doesn't really care about what you do. It's how you make them feel while you're doing it.
Hmm.
And that's what I thought of when I read this
Oh,
animal magnetism.
you absolutely coined it. And that's part of, kind of what my emphasis on teaching is, first of all, the awareness of what are you emitting out there into the world? How are other people interpreting you as a human? Including your animals. And you can see that. It's like the horses go, oh, well, some people and other people, they want to be next to them. And it's like, what's the difference? We can't see that difference. But scientifically, there is a difference. There's a difference in their physiology and their, all those things that a prey animal reads,
Oh,
to
yeah.
determine whether you're safe or not safe. So, having that awareness is number one. And then knowing what to do. Well, now I have the awareness that maybe my energy is not so great sometimes. What do I do about that? How do I change it? And so that's, this first book that I wrote, I want to write another one. It's more about, that was about what I do. I do these things, but not how I do them necessarily. And I think this is where, getting into, but how do I change my energy? And that's really kind of what my focus is now. It's like having awareness of our energy, deciding which energy we want to be emitting out there. And I talk about myself as like I'm a radio station and I play different genres of music. And I have to decide, as a radio station, I'm transmitting this. And as you on the other end, you decide, I'm coming in here today and I want to listen to easy listening station. So you know exactly where to dial to, and you'll get that easy listening station. So I'm also, when I'm working with an animal, I'm thinking, okay, that animal seems a little stressed. So maybe he needs the easy listening station for a little bit. And I'm going to change my thoughts, my emotions to align with a calmness. And then I don't have to do anything else. I am now a radio station emitting that music out into the world. And if that animal says, oh, I like that, they're going to stop and they're going to listen. And then they're going to copy that, or how you will sing along with a song that you like. That's the analogy I like to use. It's like that horse goes, oh, I like your energy. I'm going to sing along with you. And then they calm down in the process. And it's like, I don't have to do anything else other than just keep playing that tune, if that
It's
makes
a,
sense.
oh yeah, great analogy, great analogy. And it reminds me kind of my wife and I when we were young. I met my wife when I was 13 and she was 12,
Oh
and
my gosh.
so we've known each other for a long time. And anyways, but at some point as a teenager, um, one day we met up. Our families were friends. We'd go ride together. We'd go camping together and all kinds of stuff. And anyway, apparently one day, and I didn't know this till way later, but I was playing some music that she just did not like. And she said, I really liked you until you played that music. I don't really like you. I don't really like you now. You know? So
Oh my
I
gosh.
had to change my tune like you're talking about it. And that's the same thing with our equine partners.
Oh, exactly. The mule's like, I don't like the tune you're playing.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Right.
I'm going to run away from that one as much as I can.
Well,
Uh,
I think a lot of people don't consider that. And but if we can consider that, we could consider the horse, consider the mule, where they're coming from that day.
mhm.
We can adjust to fit, and
So,
I've tried to pay better attention, as I'm making that approach. I guess you could say reading the room, as you're approaching the pasture, the paddock, the corral, the barn, the stall, whatever, how is the animal taking you on, and what adjustments do I need to make, as
Right.
I'm making that approach? If I'm coming in too hot, I gotta chill out here, or I can even come in too
Too.
cool
Mhm.
to where the animal's like, I don't like that either.
Right,
What's going on with you there,
right.
and I've found too that some animals are more sensitive to this feel than others.
Mhm.
We get some that, the good old dude mule that's just
Yeah,
kind of, and now I know a little bit more that, well, they've kind of learned to tune a human out is what it really
right.
is. That's really
Mm,
what it is. It's not that
right.
they're just docile and dumb. No, they've kind of learned to tune a human out because likely the human has tuned them out in the past.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I see
Absolutely,
that. So,
absolutely. And I think that's, for me, it's, those ones like that are the challenge because you're thinking, well, they're just going to blow you off regardless because they're just going to go through the motions of what does the human want me to do, and I'm just going to do it and endure this time with this human and do what they want, make peace. Because I think mules, horses want to have peace, you know.
yeah.
So for me, getting to those is the challenge, the ones that have kind of blown people off, and I love to get through them when, I have different techniques that sound a little crazy, but they work so well. And I just for an example, I had one big old ranch gelding. He came in and he's Mr. I'm solid. I'm solid as a rock. He's standing there and it's like, I'm a good boy. I do everything I'm supposed to. And it's this is kind of weird where I get into the Dr. Doolittle a little bit, but I can explain this scientifically. But I ask him a question. I go, hey, got anything you need to show or tell me today? And I direct it right at him. And behind my words, there's pictures, there's intention, and all that, which I think is what the horses and mules pick up on. And it was like all of a sudden he got this look. I swear it was a look on his face, like, oh my God, I think she's talking to me. And you can see his ears are going back and forth, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Oh my God, a person is talking to me. And I saw him like very slowly, like kind of turn around like this and look behind him. Oh, nobody's over there. And then he looks around the other side. Oh my God, I think she did talk to me. And then he stood there for the longest time, and then I think he pointed to something on his body. Like he's like, I'll see if she's really listening. And he kind of flicked an ear back and kind of like looked like on the side, and I go, oh, I see that. Well, you could let go of that tension if you want. And then you could see him going, oh my God, she did really notice, and it was really just that awareness, attention. The horse was speaking to me, and it was like he stood there for the longest time, and then he just let go of a big bunch of tension. He just had a big lick and chew, and I think a yawn, and it's like, wow, first time in his life, somebody had asked him about himself, anything you need to tell me. And this seems like such a crazy question. I have these questions that I ask the horses, and they seem like, oh, I should be doing something so they would understand. I don't know how they understand it, but they understand my intention, that I want to hear about you today. Tell me about you. And where do you hold your attention? And I kind of equate this to how we interact with humans. A lot of times we go through and we're nice to humans. We go, oh, hi, how you doing? And that is not an open invitation for a conversation. It does not mean I want to know really anything about that. It's just a nicety, a way we go about our lives. But if I went up to that person, I said, hey, do you have anything you need to tell me today or want to share about your life today? And they go, well, that's new. Who does that? Who wants to listen to me tell? I think it's that same thing with the horses. This one question really opens up this conversation with them. If we sit there and we wait and we listen, I mean, the amount of time that I waited from the time I asked that question and then saw the wheel start spinning in his head going, whoa, this is it. It was quite a long time before he actually answered that question. And That's where I think we get in trouble a lot of times. We expect as humans the answer to be right there. When I ask you, you answer. Sometimes the answer takes some time. And as you start to pay attention to your horse or your mule and you ask these questions, they get faster at answering. And so you don't have to wait as long. But the first few times on an animal that hasn't been listened to is it's a long time. And I'm not saying, I'm in that camp of, oh, I have to get permission from the horse for everything. And no, I want to have a conversation with my horse, especially like you. I was doing pretty dangerous work with my animals. Where, cattle work is not easy. Lots of things can happen. I want a partner out there. I don't want somebody who's just waiting for the chance to get rid of me and then run off. I want a partner. And a partner means that I listen to them and I have a conversation and I am aware of when they're struggling and I know what station to play and all of those kind of things. It's just a partnership with a human is the same thing, I think.
Oh yeah, that what keeps coming to my mind, Susan, is there's a difference in talking with somebody or something or talking at them.
Hmm.
We've all been talked at, where
Right,
you're just being spoken to, not really spoken with. It's a total different feel. And if you just been talked at, you eventually learn to ignore them,
right.
or kind of tune them out slightly. I mean, maybe you get a little of it, but not a lot. And I think a lot of people talk at
Hmm.
their equine instead of talking with them.
Right.
Where I, you know, I meet plenty of people that are really good at asking questions. They can ask questions all right, but do
Mhm.
they actually pause to listen to the answer?
Right.
And that's where we all got to be better. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm good at this. I got to be better too,
Yeah.
because I've done my share of talking at. I really have.
Good.
So, yeah.
I think of the Sacred Spaces book. It's not as much of, yes, it is about horsemanship and all that, but it's really about us as humans,
Oh yeah.
about how do we become better humans? And it's all those things. And I used horses because they were my comfort place. I used horses as the place where we can see the effect of that we have on others. Because horses will tell us right away when we're not on board, and we're coming in with bad energy. They're going to really tell us. Whereas a human might not necessarily, because, we as humans get used to like, oh, that's where she's at today. Let's just, whatever humor, what. No, I am thinking the horses are helping us in so many ways to become better as a human being. Um, if I think about going to church, yeah, we're sometimes talked at church. You're told these things. I think the horses are that place to practice those things that we might learn in church and go in and say, oh, am I really walking the walk? Am I really the person I think I am? Or do I need to work on some things? And I think horses and mules are very good at pointing out those little deficits in your character and your energy and all that. And they will point it out. Sometimes it's a little brutal. Sometimes they're gentle about it. But I like to take those cues. It's like I've got some work to do in this area of myself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they just reflect right back to you.
Hmm.
You know, there's a student of mine that has a little bit of things going on with other family members. These other family members just want to use the mules for hunting and basically pull them out in the fall. You know the deal. Pull them out in the
Yeah.
fall, go use them and put them back away, and and the certain family member was kind of getting upset with her about like, well, I don't want to work on all this stuff. I don't want to do. I just want to go use them. And she's trying to explain that, well, sorry, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, maybe now and again, but it just doesn't work. You have that's you're comparing it to us as humans, and it's so accurate because no human would wanna be used like that.
No,
I mean, that they wouldn't be willing. They would not gonna be a willing partner, and, you're gonna have some troubles, and yeah, I'm not saying you can't do it. You can do it through force. I mean, it's been
oh,
done.
yeah,
You can force your mules, your horses, and,
right,
go grab yourself your whatever, your bigger chain and your bigger whip. Okay. I'm not arguing that you can't get it done, but that's
right.
not how I wanna get it done. That's
No,
not the partnership that I'm interested in. So you gotta
no.
work at these things, um, which kinda leads us to the next part of this. I'm gonna go back to the book here, okay?
Okay.
We kinda mentioned this already a little bit about connection here, but equestrians often share with me that they wish they could have a sustainable or consistent connection with their horse. They tell me they have tried different riding, and groundwork techniques. They've attended training, um, and behavioral seminars. They read countless books on the subject. They've taken lessons from different equestrian masters. The new information or technique they learned worked for a while, but there was usually an inevitable return of the old problem or issue. Now you know that there's a state of heart and mind that excuse me, that deepens connection, enhances communication, and decreases stress or anxiety. You understand that positive thoughts and emotions coupled with a slow alpha brainwave pattern puts you in an optimum state to send and receive data from the energy field. Armed with this new information, you may feel a twinge of excitement when you imagine the implications for you and your horse. Heart and mind speak a universal language when they unite on the same wavelength. When they do, communion is possible. Now, I skipped ahead in the book a little bit, so some of our listeners are probably wondering what the heck we're talking about, these alpha brain waves and all this other kind of stuff, but they got to get the book.
There
But
you go.
what I really wanted to talk about was, and you kind of mentioned both things already, this universal language connected to communion. Why is it important that we have this universal language to connect us to this communion?
Because I think that a lot of times in the horsemanship that I was taught, we're either trying to get the horse to understand our language as humans, or we're trying to mimic a horse in some way. And I don't think we came here. We're not horses. They're not humans. And when I was thinking about it in those terms, it's like, but all beings have some way that we can communicate our intentions, and it's through that energy. It's through that other place, and we don't have to change who we are to speak that way. We, at some point, our ancestors, and probably not that long ago, were far more connected to themselves, to their emotions, to the land around them. They could feel changes in the weather before it happened. They could like go with their intuition on making decisions, and they were gathering this information from that field, that feeling field. And that's the universal language. It's like, well, I felt the wind was a little different today. Oh, it must mean this. So they're gathering this information that nowadays we just disregard. I'm asking, go back to that way, those resurrect those things that we used to be able to notice and sense in a natural way. I mean, they're not some kind of weird thing that doesn't only some people have. No, we all used to have that. And horses have it still in spades. They really listen to everything going on around them in the energy field, and they're making assessments. We don't do that. But we can do that, and that's why I'm saying that universal language, then we start to speak in the same way, and the way that I speak is through feelings, through thoughts, emotions, through my breath, the way that I breathe. And I really didn't I wanna talk just a little bit about that, which wasn't in the book, but, all of those things, we're all gonna be natural then, instead of trying to contrive something or trying to be something we're not. I'm not a horse. I will never be a horse, but I could speak to that horse through the energy. and he would understand me. And if I were practicing on it and became quiet and still in my body, I could start to actually receive the information from that animal too. And I'm not talking like words, a lot of people go, oh, you're going to talk in words. No, I don't really think of it as talking in words. It's just like, I feel this difference, and oh, that's what that means. That something changed. And I call it non-eyes, actually. It's like, don't assess the horse always with just your visual senses, like your eyes, to tell you what's going on. Close your eyes, feel what's going on. If you start to close off one of your senses, you're going to get the other one revved up a little bit, and you start to feel, oh, wow, I just felt that change in the horse. I just felt something different. Okay. And it's that communication that leads to communion, not us in our intellectual mind and using just our visual sense to like assess everything. No, use all of your senses, every single one of them, to us to determine what's going on with that animal and what's happening. And then, and only then, when you can access all of your different senses and have that information coming in, and then you can have that communion. That's my thought on it. Hopefully that was not too roundabout of a answer to that question, but um,
That's
we
amazing.
yeah, we've become so reliant, and this is one of my big pet peeves with horse people, and in general. It's like we think, oh, we're going to measure all this stuff, and we got to have all this stuff, and we got to have a sensor that tells us what is the heart rate of that horse, or what is this, or what is that, and that we're looking at this sensor even for ourselves and saying, oh, well, it's this. No, throw that away. Feel it. You are the sensor. You are the sensor. You just have to be quiet and train yourself to feel and notice these things that are very minute. And then you can have this communion. And when I was saying about the breathing, I kind of touched on it in the book, but I have a different way of breathing that's really going to enhance your ability to be still and to start to feel those other things. And at the same time, I want my horses to be breathing. This is one thing that people aren't noticing, is how many domesticated horses that are kept in our world are not breathing in a functional way that keeps them in a parasympathetic state. Most horses I see are in sympathetic at some degree all of the time.
Um,
And you can see that through the way they're breathing. We are in that state as human beings almost all of the time. So just changing our breathing, slowing that down, will help with the slowing down of the brain and all these other things. So that gets into a whole lot more of a discussion. I did a whole course on just how to breathe with the equines, but saying this is not a simplistic, oh, I'm going to tell you to do this thing. No, again, it's like experience, practice, practice, practice. And then the world opens up to you in a way you never knew before, because you sense things you never sensed before. And you see the world in a different way. And you actually start to maybe see the world a little bit like a horse would.
oh man,
So,
there's so many thoughts. So many thoughts.
so many thoughts. I know.
This
I,
is
I have to
wonderful.
write another book, because it's like, oh,
Yes.
sacred spaces. And, I wrote it probably, what, 7 years ago, six.
Mhm.
And I think, oh, so much has happened in that amount of time.
Oh
And
yeah.
and even maybe more clarity on how I would explain something, um, more depth to different topics and that. Um, I feel like at the time I wrote, like, oh, this is as much as I can get away with, and like people aren't going to
Yeah.
go backing away and like terrified. It's like, here it is. Let's see what happens.
Well, there's a lot to this. And just like anything else in life, kind of something that comes to my mind is like a religious sense, understanding scripture, understanding teachings. You just get line upon line, precept on precept, here a little and there a little, and you got to build from that.
Mhm.
And the first time I'd ever really I guess had a the connection of thought of what this is. Um, I had another student send me the book Kinship with All Life. Have you
Mm-hmm.
read that?
Mm-hmm.
And very interesting. And at the time, I thought that's a weird book, because it's it's odd, it's different, very different from anything mainstream. And she sent me a note in that book, and she said, uh, this was one of Ray Hunt's favorite books. He talked about this
Mm-hmm.
book often in his clinic. I never got to meet Ray Hunt, um, and I thought, oh, no, that's interesting. He was pretty, I mean, a very accomplished horseman. I mean, if he was talking about this, it must have had an effect, and then it wasn't just till a couple years ago. I actually had a student come to one of my clinics that way back when, because this is an older student, way back when, had been to a lot of Tom Dorrance clinics. And she said, "Oh, that was one of Tom Dorrance's favorite books." I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, that really makes sense because he spoke of, he I think he maybe had a different way of talking, a very simple Western way of talking, just not a lot of words, but um, this the word feel keeps coming to my mind. Is it's a lot of people when they hear the word feel, they think physical touch, which, yeah, you bet that is definitely an aspect of feel. But like you're saying, you got to be able to feel that it's deeper. It's a deeper sense. And to be able to truly feel, you have to get your mind quiet, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to get your mind quiet. Um, for
Mm-hmm.
all of us, we have so many distractions. We have that dang phone in our pocket.
Yeah.
And, there has been times in my life where I realized, am I, it seems like I am, it seems like there's something that really doesn't want me to be quiet. There's a part of me that wants to keep my mind busy, whether it's with a podcast like this, even or Facebook or answering an email or even reading, which, reading is great. But, when you're reading, you can't necessarily have a quiet mind either, because, and I've, one of my favorite things to do now, for probably the last 10 years, I just love to do it, especially on a cold morning, you know. I don't know why the cold is so something different for me, but I like it. I don't know. It's just, the- when the steam is coming off the animals and you can see the breath and they're munching on their hay
Mm-hmm.
and, it's just, you know, if I can just take 10 or 15 minutes, and I usually don't have a lot of time. I should make more time, but I don't. 10 or 15 minutes, just hang out there and just be quiet and just watch them eat,
Yeah.
listen to it, and some of it seems like my most interesting ideas have popped into my mind during those periods of time. And I think your mind has to get quiet to receive that inspiration, those thoughts, it's
I
hard to find quiet time.
absolutely, absolutely agree with you. And I think if you look at uh, any horsemen that were really, on this thing, the Ray Hunts, the Tom Dorrance, and all of those, is there's a kind of a common theme in a lot of people, and even more recent ones, that they spent a lot of time in a very isolated environment, like a very clean environment, you might say, as far as energy and distraction and all that. It was a very natural environment. It was very quiet. And I think that is so necessary for this skill development and that way to commune. And it's so hard now in our world to find those places where it's that quiet, where we don't have the distractions. But those, like you say, the brain needs quiet to be creative. Creativity comes from that quiet place. So I crave quiet place, especially if I've been out in the world and doing all that technology stuff. It's like I like to come back to my house and have complete quiet, because that's where I come and get my inspiration again, and where I get the ideas and all of that. So it's so important. It's so important. And how do you do, this is the big paradox for me. It's like, how do you help people who live in an environment that doesn't support that? How do they carve out those times where they can experience that? And hopefully that's when they step in with their horse, that they can slow down and be in that space with that horse in a quiet space. Yeah.
When I do my clinics in the beginning of the session, I say a few things every clinic, and I don't know how many people catch on to certain phrases that I say, but I say things very intentionally. I'll usually walk in and I'll say, "What day is it?" And some students, the new ones, the first timers, they go, "Well, it's Thursday." Most of my clinics start on a Thursday, so they go, "Oh, it's Thursday." Then I say, "No." And somebody else says, "Well, September, whatever, no." And then finally, a student that has usually been multiple times, they'll yell out, "It's the best day ever." Because that's what I get everybody saying, like, "This is the best day ever." And I
Wow.
like that because it brings about a positive outlook on this, on what this moment is going to be. The day just started. It's the morning. It's going to be the best day ever. And
Cool.
then I'll usually say something. And I think most people are usually kind of giggling about the best day ever thing. They miss it, I think. That's okay because I only want those to catch on to it that are ready. I'll
Mhm.
say this. I'll say, we're going to work this week here on quite a few things that are special to me. I want you to know this. There's more to this mulemanship and horsemanship than bits and spurs and gimmicks and gadgets. And then I'll go on and I'll say, for the next 3 days, you guys have a chance to kind of leave the world behind. You can just be here with your mule, with your horse, with your donkey. A lot of donkeys come too, with your
That's good.
donkey, and don't worry about your farm and your ranch and your job and your kids at home and your spouse and your chores and your obligations. Just take the next 3 days and focus, at least during class, on being totally present with your animal. And
Mhm.
but it's easy to say. And it's easy actually to say that we want to have it happen. It is hard to do.
Oh, it's so hard.
I think that takes practice. And like you're talking about, how can these people that maybe don't have the access? I can walk out back and I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere out here a little bit. And you know, I can walk out back here. I can be just by myself in the woods in 1 minute, you know. I can be
Mhm.
up on the mountain in 10 minutes, just completely by myself. But people that aren't in that environment, I think it takes even more practice because you have to be by yourself in a group
Right. And you have to be with yourself, you
with
know?
yourself.
Oh,
Yes.
that's what I think is the hardest with the quiet is like, oh, all these distractions can keep me from really living in my own body and being, noticing myself. And then when you're sometimes the people are like, this is so excruciatingly horrible to be in quiet, and I've got to live with my own thoughts now, and I can't distract them. They're just having the hardest time, and it's like it's so hard for them, just as hard as it is for me to go into a really crowded high energy environment, with a lot of people, noise, all that. That's excruciating for me. And so I can kind of relate to, if that's what you're used to and what your nervous system is accustomed to go into quiet is terrifying. And it's
Yeah, it's so
hard.
funny because like you're saying, I crave that. Like, I
Yeah.
can't wait. It might sound weird. I can't wait to just be by myself in my head. Just,
Hmm.
just think. And I write quite a bit too, and I crave the moments. I'm like, okay, just let my mind flow. Just,
Hmm.
just let it. I need it to flow without all those surrounding noises and things. And
Right.
I want to be by myself. And like you're saying, it is hard for me being that way to understand when somebody says, "Oh, I hate being by myself with my thoughts."
I know. It's like, what?
So I'm like, I wish I could relate to you, but I can't. I don't know. I don't
I
know.
know.
I'm
And
trying.
I think that's the challenge. The horses are probably more like us as far as craving that peace and the quiet and the stillness and all that. And then here comes the brain that's like going a million miles an hour, and the animal is just off. I mean, you're not in a place of communion because you're not on the same wavelength at all.
Oh yeah.
So there's gotta be a little give and take on that, and I think it's, so much in the horsemanship in the past was about just make the animal endure you, like they have to do it regardless of how you step into that space with them. And now it's like, wait, I'm going to take some accountability for my own stuff and how I'm entering that space with that animal or with that human. And I'm going to have awareness of it. And I'm going to do my best to come meet them at a place that's, a little more
Yeah.
agreeable to them, because I think most people love their animals, they come to you or me, they love their animals. They want to do the best by them. And maybe they don't know some of these things. And
Well, I think a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. It's the phrase, they don't know what they don't know.
right.
If they just got a little taste, if and I'll tell my students that often. If I could just bottle it up and give you just a little sip of it, just to have a little droplet of some of these moments. And
Hmm.
these moments, even for me, are scarce. They don't come often. It's not like I walk out there and everything works out for me. In fact, most of the time it doesn't. It's these small moments that I hold on to and I cherish. But
Yeah.
if I, it's those small moments that have got me addicted.
I, and that's what I think, even that experience that you talked about, and read the story about it, that was the, if you want to call it the addiction to this. It's like, I
Yeah.
got to know it. I got to chase that feeling again. I've got to know why that happened because I would love that to occur again. And, stringing together those really cool moments, is my goal. It's like, wow, are we meant to come to this world and be just in angst all the time and all this, or are we meant to seek those places of the wonder and the amazement? And isn't that just great, but I mean, realistically, we don't want to live there all the time because then we would start to say, oh, well, that's every day and it doesn't impact us the same way. But those are motivating enough to keep you searching, I think, if you really want that.
Yeah.
Because that for me, it's like, I want to experience that again,
Oh yeah.
you know?
They're little moments of inspiration and they come rarely. But when they're there and you actually get to partake of them, well, there's
Yeah,
nothing better.
right. And and I think, the animals feel the same way when
Oh
they
yeah.
can have a moment with a human like that.
Yeah.
I think it impacts them the same way. And you get that closer bond.
Let's go back to the book for a second here. Mary sat cross-legged on the cold yoga mat. She had hoped that the class would give her a moment of relief from the never-ending barrage of worrisome thoughts running through her mind, but she couldn't make them stop. She felt even more irritated when she heard the instructor's calm voice tell everyone to let go and empty their minds. Yeah, I've learned to never tell my wife to calm down.
Yes.
That's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Okay. Anger flushed over her face as she muttered under her breath, "That's easy for him to say. He's not living my life." The harder Mary tried to push her thoughts away, the more they pushed back, inundating her mind. She felt like a failure. She peeked through one eye and gazed around the room full of meditators. They all seemed serene and quiet. That made her even more frustrated. But Mary didn't realize she was on the precipice of a breakthrough, courtesy of her horse, Max. On the way to the stable after the meditation class, Mary decided that her scheduled riding lesson on Max would be a terrible idea, especially given her present state of mind. She needed someone to understand the pressures and disappointments of her life, not an instructor focused on pointing out all her riding faults. She worked hard to hide her flaws from people. When Mary entered Max's stall, he softly nickered to her. His gentle gesture caused her dam of built up emotions to break. She buried her face in Max's soft neck, and her flood of tears soaked his beautiful ebony and white hair. She spoke to him about the negative thoughts that consumed her. He listened like the most empathetic therapist. She thought her negative thoughts and emotions would cause him to want to flee. Instead, he stood patiently, waiting until she had confessed all of her inner conflicts, secrets, and insecurities. It was cathartic. Her worries floated away, and she took a deep breath. Max lowered his head, yawned, and chewed. He was more relaxed than she had ever seen him. She saddled him up, and they had a wonderful ride. Instead of spooking at imaginary things like he commonly did, he was focused and steady. Mary called me immediately after her lesson, eager to find an answer to Max's curious response to her emotional release. She explained to me that after spilling her heart out, Max changed. I asked her if she was the one who changed, and she seemed confused. After thinking it over for a moment, she excitedly blurted out, "It's the first time in my life I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. I became congruent." Mary realized being congruent, the same person inside and out, is why Max let down his defenses and relaxed. Before I could ask, she added, "You won't believe it. I was finally able to stop the self criticism and endless mind chatter in my head." That word congruent is very interesting to me. I like it. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I get cult starters, in my cult starting classes that, they're saying to themselves, "Okay, I'm calm, be calm, be calm, be calm." And really they're just wound up.
Yeah,
They're not congruent. So let's talk about this a little bit.
yeah. And I think congruency for me, and I'm just going to speak from the perspective of a woman, like at the time when I was learning natural horsemanship and all this stuff, it was always taught by a man, and it was like the man was saying, "Here, do these things and do this and do," and I was thinking, yeah, but that doesn't feel congruent for me as a woman. That's not how I am. And I always felt like a phony, like, oh yeah, I can pretend to be big and I can pretend to do all these things. And it's like, but that's not congruent. And when I kind of gave up the idea that I had to be a man to start a horse, I could give myself the permission to start a horse the way I would do it as a woman. And there's some differences in it. I mean, men have more power, strength and all those things. And it's like, yeah, but I can't ever be that. And so a long time of my life I spent going, gosh, I wish I were a guy so that I could do this, and
Yeah.
and and I'm only like 5'1" and at the time 100 pounds, I'm not big. And I'm like, does that mean I can't do this? And I have to be somebody I'm not to actually start horses and all this. And so that piece, when I let go of I have to be like a guy when I do this, there was that piece of congruency. Then I can do it the way it feels right for me as a woman with my skill set. And so I think that's important because I don't know about you, but like most of my clients are women. Um, and and so many times we're trying to be incongruent, we're trying to be something we're not. And I think that, all of this exploration that I'm doing is like, it's not that I don't have strength. My strength is in a different place. It's in my mind and in my emotional regulation and all of those other skills that I can start to put into effect. And in that way, I can be congruent into who I am. And I think that when horses and mules, they can smell incongruency a mile, miles away, right? It's like, yeah, you see that person going in there. It's like, I'm just all confident. And they're like, no, you're not. And
Yeah.
they just do a little gesture to the person, they fall apart. And it's like, no, he just called out your incongruency. No, you're not congruent. And so I think this is, admitting who we are is so important to ourselves and then to our animals. If you have fear, you're not going to be able to hide your fear. You know that. Like you're saying that the animal is going to be reading that energetic thing and going, wait, two things don't look the same. It looks like your posture is saying you're all confident in everything, but the inner part of you is saying something completely different. That incongruency drives animals nuts.
Oh yeah.
I think. I don't know what your experience, but it's there's no point in it. No point in pretending, and
Yeah.
part of this is when you can acknowledge I'm struggling today, and the horse goes, huh, got you today.
There people need to take your breathing course. Um, because when you control your breathing and you really get down to that self-regulated state, it's really hard to be a liar.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You know, like when you're really at that mind in that mind frame, you don't have any desire to be fake. You don't
Mm-mm.
have any desire to be false. When you get in that mind frame, and I believe, and breathing gets you there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you're just at peace with what you are and who you are.
Right.
You're not trying to be anybody else.
Right.
And so, if people can get to that state, then there's really no such thing as faking it till you make it.
Mm-mm.
Because when you're doing it, well, then you're actually doing it. You're actually doing the thing that you think you're faking. No, you're not. You're doing it.
Right. Right.
You're doing it. And then the other thing that I found, um, with fear, for example, I'll use that feeling is I tell my students, they'll say, okay, yeah, I am. I'm kind of scared. I'm like, good, good. I'm glad you're scared. They're like, hey, what do you mean? I came to you because I don't want to be scared anymore. I'm like, no, no, no. This is a good thing. And they're
Yeah.
like, how is me being scared of my mule a good thing? I'll tell you how. Because you're going to use that fear to your advantage. You're going to do everything in your power and your ability to be thorough in the work that you do, both physically and mentally. That goes for both you and your mule, physically and mentally, to really get down to this so that all your fears are alleviated. What are you
Right.
scared of? Well, I'm scared of getting bucked off. What can you do so that you won't get bucked off?
Mm-hmm.
There's a list of things you can do with your mule, your horse, and there's a list of
Right.
things you can do with yourself that can alleviate that. And
Right.
when people really break that down, then I think it's so helpful to them. But back to your
Absolutely.
breathing thing, like when you get in that sense after practicing your breathing, uh, it just puts you in a frame that you don't want to be a liar.
Right. Right. And it's so much about bringing you into the present moment. And that's what I really love about the breath. And when you do the breathing thing, it can re-regulate you within 1 or 2 breath cycles. And
Oh
you're
yeah.
back in your body and you're back in the present moment and you're, all of that. And I'm going to say too, it's like it's a great thing that I use with fear because I've had situations where here's this great big, and I told you how tall I am, and here's this great big Andalusian stallion that comes in and it's like ready to bite your face off. And it's like, okay, I could feel that fear start to like come up. And I go, okay, he's going to feed off of that. He likes to have people off balance emotionally. And he's looking for an energetic leader. He's looking for somebody that doesn't call his bluff. And I've got to be here and I can call his bluff by saying, yeah, I'm afraid for a second. And then I go in and I re-regulate my nervous system and I get myself calm again. And he's like, dang. And then he tries something else and it's like, ooh, got me for a second. My heart rate went up. I noticed it. I'm going to go back and re-regulate myself again. And they sometimes they try that for a couple times and they go, wow, it's very interesting that I could give her everything I've got, like all the scary things that usually make people get all busy and like correcting me and getting all anxious and everything. And she didn't do it. Wow, there's a leader. There's somebody I could follow and trust. And when we get fearful, it's when our ability to handle the situation is exceeded. We're beyond our skill set. So I love what you're saying about go back. There's a million things you can do to increase your skill set so that you can handle this situation in front of you. And it's like, that's what I'm thankful for the natural horsemanship stuff that I learned. It's like position and where you're at and what is, how do you keep yourself in a safe place in light of what's going on? And that confidence in that place of like, I do have a skill set. I can I can do this. If I don't have the skill set, you better believe it, I'm out of there. There was one time where I was out over the top of a round pen faster than I thought this old body could do it. Like, I think I just sprinted and cleared the whole fence in one stride. It's like I was exceeding my skill set. The situation exceeded my skill set, and I got out of there. Okay, so this is really important. Fear is a very important thing. It's going to keep you alive. if you listen to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I tell people don't be afraid of fear.
Right.
You just understand it and respect it and do something about it. I mean, fear is a good thing. We have fear. That's what has kept the human species around for so long. Is
Right.
we're afraid of stuff. Okay, well, you're afraid of
Yeah.
starving. Cool, eat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I
But
want to talk about a little bit the science of make believe because this is probably one of my favorite chapters of yours here. I'm gonna read a little bit.
okay.
You may wonder how imagining something can bring it into existence. It's really not as magical as it might seem. When scientists developed sophisticated brain imaging technology, they could finally observe what happens in people's brains when they imagine. And you could insert the word visualize or picture or whatever.
Yeah.
When neuroscientists found, what neuroscientists found was mind blowing. They discovered that the brain doesn't know the difference between reality and make believe. For decades now, neuroscientists have compared the brains of people when they are engaged in an activity versus when they just imagine they're doing the same activity. There's no noticeable difference. The same areas of the brain become activated. I'm going to skip down a little bit. This is, how do I say this last name? Dr. Norman Dodge? Dodge?
So your guess is as good as mine.
All right. Dr. D.
Dr. D, there you go.
This is what he said. When people close their eyes and visualize a simple object such as the letter A, the primary visual cortex lights up in the brain scan, just as it would if the people were actually looking at the letter A. And this happens with complex imagery as well. This is fascinating. This is so fascinating. Another book of mine, another favorite book of mine, rather, is With Winning in Mind
Mm-hmm.
by Lanny Bassam. And I told you about my coach, Louis Fields. Now, I didn't
Yeah.
know this at the time. I had no idea at the time. He's since passed away. Um, but his son, who was a friend of mine, and another guy, they were on a podcast talking about Louis. And they said, yeah, Dad would make us read With Winning in Mind. He made us read it over and over again. And I'm like, wait, hold on a second. What is that? Anyways, I bought the book, and I mean, it's all about this imaging, visualization, picturing. He calls it rehearsing. There's all these
Mm-hmm.
different words, and I think they're applicable. But but you have, you have brought this information to your students here and us that hey, there's science to this stuff. This
Right.
isn't just like you're saying, the science of make believe. This is the science of make believe. So let's talk about that a little bit because I have experienced this so much. My listeners have heard this story and they're probably sick of it, but you haven't, so I'll tell you.
Okay.
So when I this is has to do with my coach Louis. Okay. So when I was in high school, I had a hard time marking the horse out, the saddle bronc horse. So you have to have your heels at the point of the shoulder, the first jump out. It's a rule in saddle bronc riding. Anyways, I had a problem with that. I kept pulling my feet back, which it doesn't matter how good of a ride I made, I'm disqualified, right? I'm
Mhm.
out. And all my buddies, they thought they were doing so good. They're like, right before I go, they're slapping me on the back saying, all right, Ty, don't miss them out. Don't miss them out, right? Don't miss them out. Well, what am I picturing?
Mhm.
I'm picturing missing the horse out. That's
Yeah.
it. And they thought they were just being so helpful. And I thought they were being helpful too. And it wasn't until I started hanging out with Louis, he's like, no, 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 no. We got to change this whole thing. Picture a good mark out. And all it was how uh he put together the sentence. He
Mhm.
restructured the sentence and said, get a good mark out.
Right.
That's it. That's all it was. And then he got me thinking about it. And he said, just think about a good mark out. Picture what a good mark out looks like. That's it. I mean, words are so powerful and
They,
in our minds are so powerful. So let's talk about this a little bit, Suzanne, because like I said, this is one of my favorite chapters of the book. This is so cool.
it's right down my alley. I mean, I love this stuff. And again, I said I went and studied that for a year after my PhD is like, I really want to know this mental part of it.
Oh
It's
yeah.
fascinating.
Um, let's talk to me a little bit about the combination of this mental imagery with the physical training. So to me, this is the combination of it. This is what we should all be doing, thinking about it, but then hey, you got to go do something too, you know.
Mhm.
But
Right.
let's so tell us a little bit about that.
Um, so a lot of times, and I'll just say one of the really effective techniques that I used when I was learning something is that I would go through and, my instructor would be, do this, that, the other thing. Then I finally get the movement right. And I would stop then and I would sit on my horse for a moment and I would replay what just happened over and over in my mind. I would replay that feel of it. I would put in all of the senses that I had, all of the body sensations, everything that I could imagine about that thing that just happened when it went right. And then, okay, I would just play it again. And sometimes I would stop at that point and get off. And then I would play with that same imagery whenever I thought of it and making it short, not like I had an hour of having to do the imagery, but just maybe a minute at a time. Whenever I was standing in line or I was driving somewhere and I could just think about that. What did that feel like? What did I see? What did I feel? And what's amazing is that I didn't have to go and practice that a whole lot more on the ground on my horse. I got the one time when it was really good, and then I replayed that again and again until I got that new neural pathway for doing it the correct way or the way I wanted it to be. And that's the key to this, when you're doing all of this rehearsal, if you want to say, don't rehearse the bad parts, rehearse the good part. And with that said, there are some times where visualization is really important to see or imagine yourself overcoming an obstacle that's there. Okay, and that's another effective way. And we could talk about visualization for days, a
Oh
week
yeah.
or more, and never touch on all of the possibilities on this. But so important to start to train your brain for what you want it to do, not what you don't want it to do. So if you're in the visualization and you keep having that block of like disaster strikes, oh my God, you're going to stop it, start over again, get past that point as often as you can. And I like to use visualization. If there's a big block with an animal or something that I'm doing or a fear thing, I like to do that off of the animal, that visualization part, so that I'm not inflicting that on the animal. And then they're somehow triggering me back into the fear every time I get on and try to practice that thing again. My body feels the animal. I mean, there's that symbiotic relationship where the horse feels your tension about it, then they react in a certain way that's predictable for that thing, and then you're back in that loop. Your best bet is to take that, go practice it off the horse over and over till you can get through it without getting the fear place or without the catastrophe happening in that visualization that you're doing, and you do it over and over and over. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's like how much in my life I've practiced something over and over until it's reality, until now you're just firing those neurons when you go to do that thing. And then you sit on your horse and you get now triggered to a positive outcome rather than into a fear or something else. Okay, because you've taught your brain and your body to be in alignment for the thing that you wanted to do. Um, so again, this is kind of hard for me to explain here in this moment, but I
Oh
think
yeah.
you get
We
it.
could
And
go into this so deep. But
yeah, and there's so many ways that we can imagine, and there's a lot of times where I did imagine myself as somebody else riding. Like I rode through their body. Like how would that person ride? And that was helpful for me. So you can do third person, you can do first person, you can do present, you can do above, below, wherever the perspective is, there's just so many different techniques, and those would depend on the situation and the person. And I just want to say one thing about visualization, because believe it or not, I did not used to make pictures. I could not make pictures. I went to seminar after seminar with my sister sometimes, and we'd be in this big thing and they saying, imagine this thing that's happening. And I'm like, got my eyes closed and it is black. I mean, pitch black. I'm seeing nothing. And then my sister's next to me. She goes, oh, it's like a movie going and I saw all this stuff. And I'm like, really? I didn't see anything. And then the more I felt like I'm not seeing anything, the more attention I brought into it. And the more I thought I was a failure at it and I couldn't do it. And the only thing I had to realize was that I imagine in a different way. I imagine through kinesthetic and a body feeling and all of that. And when I gave myself permission to visualize through how my body felt, it was like, oh, I got this. So, I just want to have people understand like, if you say, I can't make pictures, so forget it, I'm not going to do that thing. No, find how you do visualize. Maybe you talk yourself through it in your head. It's called auditory digital. You talk yourself through, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing that. You're talking about those people that talk to their horse too much. Sometimes they might have to because they can't visualize. But what I noticed over time of practicing with the way that my body felt it was through the feeling and everything. Now I do get pictures, but they're not like a movie playing. They're like ideas of a picture. If that doesn't really even make any sense when I say it, but it's like, oh, I know that's what I'm going to do and I can kind of see it, but it doesn't show up in my visual field out here or in my brain like a movie playing, but I still imagine I'm doing it. And this is where it's really hard. And as you're coaching people through some of these things about visualizing, it's like understanding that, wow, that's how you're doing it. And don't feel bad if that's how you do it. Um, and it's just as effective. Um, I would say at the most I get like a flash of a picture, but I don't think that my kinesthetic visualization is any less effective than if I were a visual.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important, like you're saying, we have to work at this. Um, See, I'm a daydreamer. So I was the kid in school that I was playing a movie in my head. I was thinking about my ride. And so in my mind, it comes very, very easy to picture exactly what is happening. My difficulty in my life has actually been speaking it in words. As a teacher, I've been doing clinics for going on 13 years, and that has been my biggest struggle is, okay, let's get let's put some vocabulary to these pictures so I can help my students see what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
That's been my biggest struggle, but something I have my students do, and I found this to be it kind of pays double because it works for both the animal and the human. So before they ask the animal, so let's say in my groundwork class, we're going to do a maneuver. I'll have my students. I say, pause. Don't do anything physical. I just want you to think about it in your own way. And I always say your own way because, like you're talking, I don't know how they visualize,
Right.
but in your own way, think about what you want the animal to do, exactly how you want them to do it. Visualize also how you're going to present that idea to them and ask them to do it. Then go ahead and do it. Do the thing physically. Go ahead and make the maneuver happen. As soon as you're done with the maneuver, I want you to just quiet your mind and only observe what the animal is doing in response. So
Mm-hmm.
you do the maneuver, now you're just leaving them alone. We call it soak time, dwell time, whatever, and just observe. So I found that by letting them take that moment to just observe, they're giving that animal that soak time for one, and they're letting their brain get quiet again. And I'll
Right.
say, okay, you want to repeat it. Now you're going to visualize again and then do the thing and then reflect. And I found that to be much more beneficial than just say, all right, go ahead and go work at these things. And they
Mm-hmm.
just turn loose. And
Right.
some of them go hammer, hammer, hammer. And they just, they're not thinking about it all. They're just doing. And others go think about it too much even and never do the thing. So there's a balance there. And like we're
Yeah.
talking about here in actually doing it and thinking about it, that has to come together. Something I
Right.
found interesting in the book here was when you're talking about how the same parts of our brain fire when we were watching other people do
Mm-hmm.
thing. Now, this is important to me because, um, well, you know the deal. It's hard to make everybody happy. So, like, if I bring a mule to one of my clinics that is really handy, really good, dialed in on the maneuvers,
Yeah.
people are like, I wish you would bring something that was more difficult so we could see how you'd something more like my mule. And then if I
Mm-hmm.
bring something that is a little bit more difficult, like a younger one or whatever, then like, I wish you'd bring something really good. So
Yeah.
you can never make everybody happy. But this is what I say. I say, especially to the people that are new to these concepts, is no, you need to see me do it well on one that totally understands. You need to see how it's done. That should
Mm-hmm.
be your very first priority. And then you need to have some skills, both mentally and physically built up before your brain can handle watching me work on something difficult. And because I've had students that were newer to this, they see me work on something that is difficult and they realize that, yeah, it's not always hunky dory. No, this is
Right.
hard. I do get drug around sometimes and I do get
Yeah.
knocked over and
Right.
there is some dust sometimes and I don't want it to happen, but it does.
Right.
But I don't want you watching those things and having those visuals until you
Exactly.
are solid on how it should be done so that you can picture the outcome, because in those situations when I am having a hard time, when I'm having a difficult time with whatever, when the trouble is there, my mind isn't on the trouble. My mind is still thinking about how I want it to go. So
Right.
I
Right.
have the ability to say, yeah, I know we're doing this, and yep, I know you just kicked me in the gut,
Yeah.
but I know what I want. I know how this is going to end up, and that's where my focus is. But it takes a lot of maturity to be able to do that.
Right. And that's really good. And I think it's so important and um for people to see the outcome and to know that there's struggle in between there. It's I think there's this fallacy, and especially, with the work that I do, sometimes it's like, oh, there should never be any conflict. There should never be anything that happens that's not just perfect every time. It's like, no, the conflict is where just like in any relationship, there's going to be misunderstanding, there's going to be confusion. It's how you get through that that's important, and that that there's a place on the other side of that where there's that harmony again, where you reach the understanding. And I totally agree with how you're doing it. It's like they have to see the end product. And then I think both things are important. Then how do you get to the end product? And what does that look like? And sometimes it's not 100% perfect. And, here's what the struggles look like. And here's what's really important is, how did you overcome that conflict? That's critical for learning. That's critical for everybody to have in their brain. It's like, what if you only know the end product and something comes up? Your brain has no neural pathways, no understanding of how you would actually bridge the gap between the struggle and the end product. So that's perfect, what you're doing. Perfect. Um, and just relating it to riding and stuff like that, I think that people don't have a feeling for what it's like to ride a horse or a mule that's really easy. And to my, like, part of when I was learning, it's like I got a um Grand Prix stallion that was a schoolmaster. He was pretty, like, compromised. He could do just a little bit, but enough that I could feel what each of the maneuvers felt like at that Grand Prix level. Because then I had in my idea, like you're talking about, the end product. What am I working toward? What did I want it to feel like at the end? What do I want it to look like at that end point? If I hadn't had that, I would have a skewed idea of what I was going for. And I may never know that I'd get there. And it makes me sad sometimes that people think that riding horses is hard and it has to be hard and it's never easy. It's like, no, I want you to know, if you have an opportunity, sit on a horse that's there. And then you will have another added element to where you're going to, what you're striving for. So it sounds like you got that, like you're doing that for your students, and maybe sometimes they don't understand that, but it's important for both perspectives.
Yeah, you gotta
Here.
know where you're going to be able
Yeah,
to get there. And
right.
yeah, I've had that experience, like as you're saying, that some people, they have never had the opportunity, and maybe never will have the opportunity to really ride something that already is there or close to there. So they just don't know. They just don't know what they don't know, you know?
Right.
And, to be perfectly honest, like when I bring my horse or mule that I've spent a lot of time and effort on, I'm not going to offer them up to,
Oh, gosh.
15 of my students, to have at it for the, yeah, that's just not
No.
reality either. So, I try to tell people, I want you to really think about what you want. One of my favorite exercises to have my students do is, and they like it too, is when I'm the mule or I'm the horse. So, I mean,
No.
usually this takes place in a groundwork class because I ain't gonna let them ride me, you
Oh,
know.
no.
So, in the groundwork class, for example, if we're working at, we call it clearing the fronts, to where we send the mule or horse left or right, basically to initiate like a circle, for example.
Mm.
And I'll say, okay, go ahead and ask me to go to the left. And oftentimes they'll take the lead rope and right off the bat they pull on it. They
Mm-hmm.
just instantly pop pull on it. I'm like, no, no, no. Ask me to go to the left. Again, whack. They just pull on
Yeah.
it. And I'll ask them, is that your end goal? Is that how you want? Do you want to have to make contact on your horse to get him to move? And they kind of think like, well, I don't know. I'm like, no, think about it. Do you want to have to make contact to get him to go? Because for me, the answer is heck no.
No, exactly.
Absolutely not. I want to be able to ask them on a slack rein and have them initiate, And some people have to take it a step further. They have to pull on them and they got to smack them,
Right.
And I tell people I don't have a problem with the driving part. If I had to pick between the pulling or the smacking, I'm going to choose the smacking every day because that's at least familiar. They know about the driving business. They've been driven around by
Right.
their herd mates, but I have yet to see a horse grab a lead rope and drag another horse around. I just,
Yep.
you just don't see them doing it.
No,
But I see
no.
them driving all the time. So, think about how you want this to end up and at least offer that on the start, and
Yeah.
it gets people thinking, but it's always a fun exercise, when I'm the mule.
No, I bet. Oh,
They
that would
like
be,
it.
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, on the same lines, and you may be doing this, it's like one of the things that I find very effective and to slow people down in all of this, when they're asking a horse, is that before you do something, you picture through it in your mind the whole way through. And you can watch the horse's reaction to your picture, and you can see where issues may show up just in the visualization of you going through it. So I have everybody get in the habit of before you do something, you've always pictured it, and then you walk into the picture. You picture it, you walk into the picture. That's when the horse starts to go, she's always going to tell me what we're going to do. I don't have to guess. I don't have to wonder. And I picture really more about what I'm going to do, and I watch for the horse's reaction to it. And then I can gauge, do I have to explain this different? What happened? How did he maybe have some misunderstanding in this? And so I put it back on me a lot of times if there's a reaction in the animal. Because really I think of myself again as an energetic leader. If I wasn't clear to that animal in my picture of where I was going, what I was going to do, they're not going to do it. And if I made a very clear picture and I was very intentional, then they'll go, oh, I follow her because she makes good decisions, keeps us safe, and I'm gonna go. And so I don't necessarily always look at like, what does a horse has to do for me? I just tell them what I'm gonna do as a leader. I'm leaving now and I'm going over there. And it's like, I have a good energy, I'm playing a good station over here and that seems to be something they like. And I go, okay, here's my picture. I'm going over there. And I'm finding that less and less do I have to do anything to the animal to initiate that to go. As I become more clear, concise, and predictable in what I'm picturing. And I think this is such an important skill set for anybody, even in your human world. Like how much, like a lot of times, and you've probably noticed this, you'll tell somebody, okay, now we're going to do this and this, and they're already initiating the movement forward. Like before they have all the information and know where they're going, what speed they're going, where their destination, if they already started off on it. It's like, well, where are you going? Well, I'm just following directions. No, think through each part of it. Don't just react, think through each part. And this is another place where visualization comes in a big way in the things that I teach is that know where you're going, make a plan in your mind, tell your horse what you're doing,
That's
and you're
that's
going to
just
see a big change, right?
that's just wonderful human advice. Think.
Think, because I want
If
my horse also thinking and
yeah,
not reacting. I
yes.
don't, right? I don't know about you, but I don't want a reactive horse. I want a horse that's thinking through every move that they make, not because I told them to do it, but because they are thinking about how to be in the relationship with me. And what does that mean? And they are on their own to make some decisions, but within the framework of a boundary that I set,
Oh yeah.
it's like
There's a huge
boundary,
difference in there's a huge difference in reacting or responding.
right?
And I'll often ask my students, I'll say, you don't necessarily have to define this out loud for me, but you just go ahead and think about it. What's the difference between reacting and responding?
Yeah,
Big difference.
right.
Let's go back to the book for a second here.
All right.
Again, I'm only reading just a few excerpts of this book. You guys got to get it for yourself. Let's talk about human labels. Horses aren't the only ones who receive labels. Often we assign labels to ourselves or to other riders or trainers we know, and we create a story to back up that label. The more often we tell the story, the stronger it gets. As is true with horses, human labels tend to stick. For example, if you have labeled yourself as a timid rider, your thoughts and emotions when you're around your horse will reflect that belief. Your thoughts and emotions create uh, psychological changes in your body, and your horse picks up on that energy. If you want to be a confident rider, you need to change your thoughts and emotions to those that a confident rider would have. I got so many thoughts on this one because the line you wrote about um we even put labels on other riders or trainers as a clinician, and you will know this as a teacher and a clinician yourself. People talk about us. They've never met us. They,
Mm-hmm.
they they really have no idea who we are, and yet
Right.
they have all these inclinations. And the more they talk about it, the more it becomes real. And because I meet a lot of people like, oh well, you're totally different than I thought you'd be. I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to ask what you thought I'd be.
I know.
Because they seem pretty happy. So if you thought something else, maybe I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh, but for ourselves, I tell my students same thing here. Okay, it's okay to express emotion you feel. For example, we talked about the fear. You can say, I feel afraid.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. That's different than saying you're a fearful person.
Right.
It's different than calling yourself, saying, "Oh, I'm a wimp." well,
Mhm.
no, that's not going to do you any good. It's okay to feel that way, but not to say that. And yeah, these labels are so important.
Yeah, they are so, so important. Yeah.
A little bit. I'm going to read just a little bit more here in the stories part because this is a lot of people tell stories, as you know. Back to the book here. Have you ever noticed that people have a story about their life? The story explains who they are, what they do, and why they do it. Everything they do stays within the character and plot line of their story. Some people hold on to negative, excuse me, some people hold on to a negative story about themselves for the secondary gain or payoff. They may like the attention or sympathy they receive from others when they tell their story. The stories we create for our horses work the same way. It's often hard to break free of the story of our life. If it's a positive story and things are going well, you may not want to change your story. And stories are so powerful, aren't they, Suzanne? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
and people get stuck on their stories about themselves or their animals. And um, You've heard this a million times. I know it. The person buys a horse, they buy a mule, and the animal's always better with them than it was before. You know? And they want to put this story with the animal's, oh, it's so poor, it's past life, and now it's so great. And I just want to say, well, it seems like you're keeping that baggage along with you for quite a little while. Like I don't really talk about my horses and my mules past life like that. I never really have. I don't. That
Yeah,
does that just doesn't seem to do me a whole lot of good. Yes, I do say it can be valuable to understand situations or whatever, so you have a little perspective. But I'm more interested in the present moment. Every day's a new day. Um, we teach our students to start over every day. We start over every single day. It's a new day. It's the best day ever, right? It's the best
right.
day ever. Start over again, and this is a new conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And really that story for the horses and getting stuck in that if you think about what happens in your body as you tell a negative story and knowing that the horses are picking up that energy, you're playing the doom and gloom station. And the horse is plunged into that every time they're with you, every time you say that story. And what I've noticed I really cut people off on this story. We're not going back to that. We may do some trauma release with this horse, and we're going to do a different story. That's a whole nother avenue of thing, but I don't want you focused on the past because it keeps that animal in that space. It keeps you in that space. And I know some people go to animal communicators and they go, "Well, you didn't tell me what happened on my horse." And I went to this person and they told me that this horrible thing happened and this horrible thing happened to my animal. And I thought, that's not very good. That's almost malpractice because what is happening now in your brain, every time you step into that space with your animal, you're going to be thinking about its past and the horrible things that happened. Just like you talking about going out of the box and here's where my feet need to be, my heels need to be here at the shoulder. As long as people were bringing that negative, don't do that, and that's what you were thinking, that's what your brain was doing. And it's not helpful for our horses, for ourselves to live in that past. And I love what you're saying. We are stepping in here today with who we are today. And if there's some stuff that's stuck in your body as far as trauma, we're going to help you get rid of it. I don't care what it is. I don't care what event it was. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about it. It's not helpful in any scientific or energetic way or to us moving forward for us to go back there again and again. So I'm very much about let's keep the stories in the present. What are we dealing with now? How are we going to help this animal through what they're dealing with now? How are we going to help ourselves? Horses are much better than we are at letting go of the past. So my job is not to bring it back up again. It's almost like they let it go and it's gone. Us, we keep it, because
Yeah.
again, we can replay the story and get attention or something else from that story. I've been guilty of telling those kind of stories before, like, oh, this kind of feels good to be a victim, but then I know, I don't really like being the victim, you
Yeah.
know, and I don't think horses like to be the victim either. They don't want to always be looked at as less than.
Oh yeah, so good. Like I mentioned that book with Winning in Mind by Lanny Bassam, and he talks in there about because he's an Olympic rifle shooter, and he
Mhm.
talks about when another contestant was discussing their poor performance, how that would actually affect the person listening to it.
Mhm.
And so on a selfish sense, for me, even as an instructor, when people want to give me their big sad sob story, I have to be either A, really mentally resilient to be able to take that on and listen to it thoroughly, or I do have to say, Hold on, let's just focus on what we're going to do, you know."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's tough. That's tough. I don't know how the therapists do it,
I
taking on
I'm
everybody's
not one.
emotions.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't go down that route because I was like, I couldn't listen to that's just not who I am. I feel like I could listen to a horse's stories like that, and empathize and everything, but it's like, oh, It's just too much in for my nervous system. I don't want to be in the negative all the time. And I admire people that can do the therapy stuff. Hats off to you because
Yeah, they're mentally resilient. That's the phrase I use. They're tough and they can handle it. And
yeah,
they have a
but
way of getting to that good place,
right,
and really being able to maybe detach from that.
right.
And there's a lot, like you're saying, with the horses. Yeah, I mean, I don't have that issue with the horses and mules,
Mm-mm. No,
but I guess it's because of the solid mindset that I have of I understand where you're coming from. That's fine.
right,
But this is a new day. And this is how we're going to proceed from here. And I think that's
right,
just the mindset of a winner too. Like
right.
people that in the rodeo world, we talk about short-term memory. To be successful in
Mhm.
rodeo, you have to have a short-term memory because yes, you might have got bucked off yesterday
Right.
and lost a lot of money or whatever. But guess what? You got a new horse today. You have another chance today. It's a new day. Today doesn't care about yesterday. It really doesn't.
No,
It's all right. It's about right now. And so it's kind of a
exactly.
winning mindset too. And I think people need to bring that into their horsemanship a little bit more.
Absolutely.
It would help a lot. It would help quite a bit.
Yeah.
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 And speaking of that, my next favorite chapter was attitude is everything.
It is,
Gosh, I
yes.
love this chapter.
Mm.
I'm going to read a little bit here. So back to the book again, you guys. Like I've said, I'm just reading just a few little parts. You got to get this book for yourself and get all this. It's so wonderful. I will never forget a virus I caught at a horse show in 2006. My friend Megan and I drove more than 16 hours to get to get to the showgrounds. Even though we were tired from our 2-day drive, we could hardly contain our excitement. We loved horse shows. Megan and I got the horses fed, watered, and settled in for the night. After a good night's sleep, we arrived at the showgrounds the next morning, refreshed, energetic, and tingling with anticipation. Did I mention we love horse shows? That's great. It was halfway through the morning before the virus hit us both and hard. One moment, Megan and I were laughing. The next minute, every bit of energy and enthusiasm drained from our bodies. We caught a negativity virus from a rider in our group. It hit us before, it hit us even before we set our eyes on the guy who spread it to us. Megan and I knew that something was wrong the minute we saw the rider's face. Before he said hello, he complained to us about the weather, the long plane ride, the rude show personnel, the awful food, and how exhausted he was. He criticized us for being too slow in setting up the stalls. According to him, we hadn't put things in the right places. He couldn't find his show clothes, even though they were hanging in front of his face. Nothing was right. His face, contorted into an angry grimace, cut through our good humor. A heavy black cloud of doom and gloom settled over us and the horses. The good feelings Megan and I had enjoyed earlier in the morning were soon a distant memory. We spent the next 3 days depressed and pessimistic. Unlike most shows, we didn't have fun, and neither did the horses. On the long drive home, the doom and gloom feeling lifted. Megan and I realized that we caught something from the unhappy rider. We laughed as we named it the 2006 grumpy virus. Both of us agreed that it was the worst virus we had ever experienced, and it lasted a full 3 days. I joked that maybe it was an epidemic because surely there were many other people the writer came into contact with who fell ill to his bad attitude. We should have called the Centers for Disease Control to quarantine this writer who spread it around. This incident happened before I knew how people affected others with their brain and heart waves. I didn't understand how someone's negative thoughts and emotions could be spread to others through the energy field. The horses also succumbed to the virus. They had the worst show ever. This event made an impression on me. Even now, 12 years after catching the grumpy virus, and I guess now 17 years, maybe 19 years, whatever, I can't shake the memory of what happened at that show. This is why I feel the need to stress the importance of attitude. It's something we have total control over. I love the sentence, Susan. Attitude is a choice. Amen. Attitude is
Yes.
a choice. And what a powerful little story that is, really, though. And I always I think about this, and you know, I never want to be the grumpy guy. I'm sure I have been. I'm guilty of it, and I probably will be again. But I really strive to be. You know, I guess one of my goals is when people meet me or they're around me, I really hope that they desire another interaction with me sometime, somewhere down the road. I hope they want to see me again.
Yeah,
Maybe some of
that's,
them do, maybe some don't.
well, I'm picking up good vibes on this. We've talked for quite a while, and I'm like, oh, this is such a great conversation, and so it's I can say you're the opposite of the grumpy virus, so
Oh,
it's
good.
all
Uh,
good. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about those energy that energy field, how we're picking up on that.
Yeah, and it's such an unconscious thing, it again, when, getting back to earlier conversation where I was talking about being able to feel with other senses and notice things, and we still have that ability, and until we really succumb to something like that, and we go, oh, why am I now grumpy? And like, I didn't start the day like this, and you go, oh, where did that come from? It came from the environment around me. It kept playing the doom and gloom tune on the radio, and pretty soon I'm just like downtrodden again. And I think it's so critical. And I had coached somebody, and it was actually in a human way, because they had somebody that was similar to that, that would be head of every meeting, every staff meeting that they had, and they're like, oh, we just all dread going to this meeting, and he's like, it just the doom settles over right away, and so I gave her some techniques. It's like, okay, you're going to now know that that's happening, and you're going to counter it with, you're going to stay in a different energy. Okay, you're going to keep playing a different one, no matter what it is, and you're not going to like let that draw you in and start to make you like that. That's what energy likes to do, is that entrainment piece. It's like, if it's really heavy, it's usually pretty strong energy. It'll come in there and infiltrate, and pretty soon you find yourself just drifting over there into the negativity, and you're starting to entrain to that or copy that energy. Instead, you're going to hold your own energy in your body and say, I recognize that coming in, and there's some other techniques you can use to kind of block it out, but I'm going to stay in this place. And she said it was very interesting that she and another lady in this group of, maybe there were 10 people in this staff meeting, were able to hold, just the two people were able to hold this more positive energy in their field. And it changed everything about that meeting. That person changed. It's like they can't infiltrate anymore in there. And so he actually changed and entrained to them, which was really interesting. So this whole idea of, first of all, recognizing when you're being impacted by your environment, and your environment can be people or things or events or anything else, recognize what's happening in the environment, make a choice. I'm not going to entrain to that. I'm going to choose something different, and hold that in your body. And in that way, you can deflect all of that negativity off, and you can kind of be in your own little space there. And what I like to do for horses, and you know how often horses and mules get impacted by events and other animals in their environment, and they entrain to that. One horse starts freaking out, and then the rest of them are all of a sudden in that place. We can teach our horses the same kind of resiliency and ability to hold their own energetic space and not be affected by what's going on around them. And that to me is a really critical skill set in today's world, especially, whether it's with horses or not with horses, or, whatever place you're in, is making those choices of, here's how I'm going to be in this moment. I'm going to make a choice. And that to me is that place of energetic leadership too.
That's
You can be an
so good.
energetic leader for people or animals by
Mhm.
you not going down those routes. And again, it's like lots of practice. And I think, the person that did it in the staff meeting, she came back and she's like, that was a completely different staff meeting than we've ever had. And the only thing we changed was that we noticed what was happening, and we chose something different. And
One of my favorite things to do, and I know this messes with people, and I just love it. is so if I see somebody frustrated with their horse or their mule, I'll just say, okay, hold on. Let's pause for a second. Tell me something you're grateful for about your mule or your horse. And they go, "Ah." And I'm like, no, I'm serious. You know, I'm like, no, really, tell me. And they go, uh, well, and they have such a hard time. I just have them focus. And I stole that idea from my wife because whenever I have two daughters and they're almost 12 and 10 and if they get a little grumpy or they get a little sassy or whatever, my wife says, "Okay, name five things you're grateful for." And they hate it. They hate it on the start. On the start they do, but by the time they get it out, that gratitude, the attitude of gratitude, it just has a way of letting like you just let go when you show gratitude to things. That's probably my favorite weapon to combat negativity. The
Oh,
other
absolutely.
weapon I use to combat negativity is kind of the detach and deflect. So, for example, I remember one time I had a difficult clinic. It was just one of those, how it can go. It just didn't feel like I was in it. But and as I'm walking out, this guy says, "Looks like you had quite the hard time out there today." You know? And and as much as I wanted to just stick up for myself, and say, well, and make excuses, I just said, that's a pretty accurate statement. I just kept walking, like,
Yeah.
I don't need to go into it, I'm gonna move on, I'm gonna move on and back to that being in the present moment. Okay, well, maybe I had a hard time, but I'm gonna go on with it.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
yes, got to be in a good mindset.
Yeah. And I think, and this, all these things make you a better horse person.
Oh
All
yeah.
of these mental skill sets are so critical if you really want to have that communion and you really want to have that really good outcomes. Is that it's a bunch on you. There's a whole bunch more on you than you would think.
Self-awareness is the phrase that keeps coming to my mind today, as we're visiting here. I want to finish with one more excerpt from the book.
Okay.
This is about Sarah, which I really love this little segment that you wrote here. This is so good, and I feel like this is a great way to to finish up here. I was lucky enough to have a horse who worked almost entirely off my thoughts and pictures. Sarah was one of the first foals I bred. I was there when she was born. Of all my horses, she was by far the smartest, and one of the hardest to start. When I tried to begin her initial training at 3, she was a maniac, unfocused and overreactive. I decided I wasn't making any real progress. I got the feeling she just wasn't quite ready for school. So I turned her out with the broodmares for another year. The next year, Sarah was the star student. Everything I thought she didn't learn before was there, and her training progressed quickly and easily. I had a hard time believing she was the same horse. Before long, she was my favorite horse to ride. All I had to do was think something and make a picture of it. She responded immediately and did whatever maneuver I held in my mind. Sarah showed me how sensitive horses are to mental pictures and human brain and heart waves. Humans understand images and emotions, so do horses. This is not anthropomorphizing. It has been documented by researchers. Even if you don't believe that horses see your mind pictures, understand that they are sensitive enough to detect the physiological changes in your body when you have different thoughts and emotions. Just experiment with these concepts to begin the process of constructing a universal language with your horse. Remember to stay physically, mentally, and emotionally relaxed. Thinking takes you out of the place where true communication happens. And I just love that, Suzanne. I mean, this whole concept of the universal language that you discuss in this book, all the things that you put together, it just brings so much context to what I wish we could just get everybody that rides a horse or a mule or a donkey to just really understand this and have this idea. Um, this work that you've put together, Susan, is just amazing. It really is.
Thank you.
Um, what tell us about Sarah a little bit more.
Oh my gosh. Sarah is it's hard because when I got divorced, Sarah went to be with my ex, and that was a really hard
Oh yeah.
day. I I can't even say, I think sometimes that when horses get started, I'm just gonna go back to that idea of like, it just seemed like she was so unfocused. And I think that sometimes, when horses are being started, mules, whatever, that maybe their physical body looks mature and really their emotional place, they're not emotionally mature, they're not maybe neurologically mature for what's being asked of them. And then if they get pushed in that place where they're not emotionally or uh, energetically or I just lost the word that I just said. They they just can't absorb and learn. And I think that's one thing that's often missed, and people will push them, and they're just not mature enough, and they're they can't absorb it. And so that ability, and I say not everybody has that ability to say, oh, I could just turn that horse out. I had a whole bunch of horses at the time, so it wasn't like, oh, I have to have her started this year. But that place of just interacting with her and putting her out into a natural environment, having her learn some more, having her become more mature in many, many ways in her body and her mind and all of that, it really set it up for this perfect place where now she was ready to learn. And the way I think, I don't know, she's a Morgan Mayer, and sometimes there's these ideas about Morgan Mayers are really difficult. And I think that's because they have a very high standard for an expectation in us about how we're supposed to be. And we need to be really consistent and really clear and explain things. And then they go, oh, well, why didn't you just tell me that? You know, and I think this mayors sometimes get a bad rap for the reason that they're a lot like a stallion sometimes, in the fact that you have to pay a lot more attention a lot of times. But you get their trust and you get that understanding and that communion going, they will lay down their life for you. I just feel like of all the horses I've ever had, the mayors were the ones that would outshine the stallions when it came, or even the geldings when it came to, now we're in a really sticky situation. They're like, we'll take care of you. And Sarah was kind of that horse. It just, no matter what I asked her to do, she's like, I'll do that for you and I'll do it really well. And I ended up, she was the one that my ex rode in dressage. And if you think of it, like, she was in the first level, whatever, training first level dressage he was riding her in. But she was essentially a horse that you could say, okay, Sarah, I need you to take care of this person. He doesn't ride that well. Just make him look good. Do the thing you know how to do. And she was a rock star. She was a rock star every time. And what was really interesting about, before every time we got to a show, and Sarah was really sensitive horse, and we'd get to the show and it would be the day before and he'd be warming up and he would come off of his job, which was, he would bring in a lot of anxiety and angst, and he couldn't leave that. And then it would just set her off and she'd be just racing around. It's not she was ever bad, she just would go really fast around and in the warm up, and he'd go, I don't know what's wrong with this horse, she just can't do this, and you go talk to her. And I go, okay, I'll go talk to her. And I just stand next to her and I go, Sarah, he has a lot of stuff. If you can just do the best you can, just go in there and do your job. And then the next day she would always come out just perfect. The short, he won everything, on her. And the funny, it's not funny. I'm gonna divulge this secret little thing that I said to her one time because it came down to the end where the same process of every show was like, you got to talk to her in the warm up day, and yeah, then she'd be really good for the rest of the time. And this particular show, it's like we were getting divorced, and it was the last time, we would be showing together, and the same process was happening. She's anxious beforehand. And he goes, would you go talk to her? And I'm thinking, oh yeah. Oh yeah, I'm gonna go talk to her. And I thought, oh, but I'm not that mean of a person. I could have gone, oh, Sarah, why don't you buck him off this time? Or, I like contained myself, and I thought, what am I gonna tell her? And so I went up and I said to her, Sarah, today, if you don't try that hard, I won't be that mad at you. And this was another one of those weird like situations. So I'm like, okay, that's all I said. I'm not gonna be mad if you don't try that hard tomorrow. Okay. So he gets in there and he's used to winning every time, and he goes in and it's like they let the air out of her tires. She went in like an old plow horse. Whoa, whoa. She did everything perfect in the thing, but it was like there was no spark, there was no enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Oh my God. He came out, he goes, what did you say to her? And I'm like, I didn't say anything, and I go, oh my gosh, did she really get that intention off of just me saying that? That kind of freaked me out a little bit more about Sarah's like, oh, she's been hearing every single thing I say.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. And that situation actually made me that much more aware of what am I saying around my horses? What am I thinking around my horses? And are they actually somehow aware of all of this stuff that I bring in? And again, getting back to that stories and not telling stories in front of them. You can watch their reaction when you're telling a negative story. So all of this I think was really cool. And Sarah came, I think, into my life to, really say, take your time, notice, speak your truth, and I will do what you want when you're fair, consistent with everything that you ask. And it was like she made training so easy, and I thought, what, maybe it is that easy if we get to their brain rather than trying to train their body. We get to their brain first, and we get that communion first, and we get that connection and that conversation going. I I will probably never have another horse at that level. And I wish I could go back and say every step I did with her. Um, but
What a great experience.
yeah,
But it's little things like that that is those animals are tipping points in our life experiences. They really are. They change everything for us. And although it's we may or may not achieve the same level or maybe a different level with another one, but those moments are special, and we got to cherish those. But again, the theme of really the theme of this book, you could have just called it awareness. It doesn't sound as cool as sacred space. The sacred spaces sounds way cooler, but
it,
it's just the more aware of ourselves we are, the more that will, I believe, offer awareness of our animals. I found it really hard to know and be aware of the animal if it's not started with us. So
right, right. Aware and thinking, aware
yes,
and think.
so good. I
Yes.
appreciate uh, I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you, Susan. This has
Oh,
been wonderful, and I mean we could just go on all day, but I know you got to get back to your farm and your life and the things you got going. But at the end of all my guest episodes, I ask the guest this one question, and you've already given so much advice, and in fact, the back of your book you have a whole list of suggestions for people to look at. Again, you guys, you got to get the book, get it, read it, study it, mark it up, use it. I love it. But anyway, Suzanne, what is one piece of advice that you would like to leave with our listeners? It doesn't have to be horsemanship. It can be any advice just going through this life um, that we live here on earth. What advice would you give them?
I would say get to know yourself.
Mm.
Spend time in the stillness with yourself. and explore who you are in that space and just be aware.
So good. We need to do more of that. All of us. Like we talked earlier in the show, that's something that I love to do, and I enjoy that time. But it's very important, I think, to receive that inspiration that we need. Very good. Well, Suzanne, thank you so much. I'm gonna give a shout out to our sponsors here. We got a bunch of them that make this podcast free for all of our listeners. Roman Home Tents, my buddy Ben Lewis. Give a shout out to him. Colt Saddlery, he builds amazing gear. You guys, if you're looking for a good saddle, look up Colt Saddlery. Western Mule Magazine, along with Mules and More Magazine. Also, Diamond W Enterprises, and of course, Boyd Ranch Mule Days. We are so grateful for all the sponsors that make this podcast available to you guys. So, thank you again, Miss Susan. I sure appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And your sponsors have such a wonderful thing that they're sponsoring here. I'm very impressed.
Thank you so much.
I'm thanking your sponsors also.
Yes, awesome. Well, everybody, God bless you, and we will see you down the road.